Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I'm your host, Marcus Atkinson, with my guest hosts, both in studio today, Chuck Cammarata and Marc Blount. If you want to know more about the show or about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram, I would say. Twitter doesn't exist anymore. On Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie to keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. The news cycles move so quickly nowadays that one can't keep up with everything that's going on. And so this is a recap show where we just get a chance to get together, talk. I love when we just have intelligent banter and sometimes just fun banter with each other about what's going on. That, to me anyways, and from some of the feedback I've gotten from a lot of our listeners, is as entertaining as having a guest in a particular topic. So we wanted to slow down and do that today. And so we'll run the gamut with some of the things that you're seeing and hearing on television, some of the things you're reading in the newspaper. I want to start out with a subject of mine. We did a show, Mark, you and I and Curtis Jones Jr. a couple of months ago. And it has turned into a controversial piece.
I heard something. Little birdies came to me on this one.
It has turned into a controversial piece. And so I've had multiple people come back and, to myself and to Curtis, and I've also, I gave a speech at the Eagles Nest for the Leadership Summit. And the speech was about closing the wealth gap. And, for a lot of people, it was like, wow, this is a great speech. And can you come and do that at my job? Other people were like, I'm not okay with what he had to say. Truth is a powerful, powerful thing, right? And so I just wanted to touch base on that and say that was interesting. You said Lil Birdie caught up with you on that too, Mark?
Yeah, because I had to tell him I was there and I don't remember that type of thing being said.
Right. And so if you didn't listen to our live interview with Curtis Jones Jr., I encourage you to go back and listen to the interview. But the content of it is the thing that was most interesting to me. Is it's content that is talked about very often in the Black community behind closed doors. And I've said that in meetings. When I've said what I said at that leadership summit, it was kind of the same thing of things are playing out a certain way when it comes to neighborhood development, and it doesn't feel equitable. Let's have this discussion and see what that sounds like. And so today, I go to an event for the Youth Leadership Institute, YLI, Edison Nicholson. And Edison was on the show before talking about mentorship. Wonderful show, wonderful brother. And he brought a keynote speaker in from Allentown. He was talking about his, the gun rate or the homicide rate in Allentown. And he does a lot of neighborhood revitalization. And I thought, man, this brother is on it. Toward the end of his speech, and he had a lot of the right people in the room, he said he partners with a lot of influential organizations to do the work that he's doing. He said he looks them in the eye and he tells them, now, if we're going to partner, you're going to have to relinquish power and trust us. Your money, your financial prowess does not outweigh our standing in community. And I yelled, amen. I think I said it 2 or 3 times. Because at the end of the day, that sentiment was the foundation of a lot of the parts of the discussion that we had that day that people are pushing back at. My thing about it is, I thought, one, I want to have him on the show so he can unpack that. But equity where neighborhood development is concerned and when I have him come on, I want to take it from an outsider's perspective because everybody gets hot and bothered when you talk about it from an Erie perspective. Gentrification is one thing. But when you talk about from a development standpoint, who is worthy of investment dollars to develop, that's a whole other conversation. And we started unpacking that when Curtis was here. And again, there's been some pushback, but I want to have that brother on the show. I know that Edison said he'll connect us, and I'll probably have to bring him in via Zoom, and I'll let you brothers know when that happens. But that I'm actually pleased that that's happening because the first thing I thought is, man, this conversation is long overdue.
Yeah, and it's leading to conversation.
Exactly. We can call a community forum on this one because it needs to be had.
Okay, I'm going to confess. I did not listen to that program. What was the controversial thing that got brought up there?
Well, there was one part in particular that was controversial. It was more personal. I won't bring that up.
Okay.
I'll let that get cleaned up on its own. But overall, and if you listen to it, we talked about how the rise of neighborhood organizations and how financially they have started to systematically sit in the seats of community organizations for large scale development dollars. So you've always had a King Center, a Booker T. Washington Center, a John F. Kennedy Center. In the last couple of decades, you started to see the rise of these neighborhood centers, which we're not mad at. A lot of them, if not all of them, are doing wonderful work. When you start talking about large scale funding, those dollars for developing these areas, those dollars are coming through these neighborhood organizations, not the neighborhood centers. And so you can outsource the issues of the people to the tune of $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to the neighborhood folk. But if you're talking about a couple $100,000, a couple $1 million to do some renovation in the area, then now we got to go to different folk. Which brought forth the greater conversation of, as a whole in community, are we trying to pick and choose winners on who gets to develop at what scale? Right. And it's gentrification of another kind. And I want to have that discussion. I think it's a worthy discussion. People get they get in their feelings when you start to have it, which says to me, we really need to have the conversation of you and your feelings about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was when we started hitting on neighborhood stuff. That's the part of it that people are like, hey.
So the thing, we were talking about this a little bit right before the show, the thing that you were talking about with this guy from Allentown, about just because you brought the money to it doesn't mean that gives you the power to make all of the decisions. It doesn't trump our connection to the community.
And this is actually something that I have said in meetings.
Yeah, so
occasions.
To me it says that there is more about these kinds of things, and this applies across the spectrum, all kinds of issues. There's more about making the world a better place than just me bringing my money in here.
Exactly.
You have to do it in consultation with and in cooperation with people who are there.
Right.
So those little neighborhood centers, they have lots to offer because they're the feet on the ground.
Right. And some of these grassroots organizations. So when he said, and the words he used specifically were, you have to relinquish power and trust me if we're going to do this together.
Yeah.
But that's the word that you use that we don't really have. And that word is trust. There's not really a trust. There's the facade of, again, we use these words, diversity, equity, because those are the words of the day, and that's the kumbaya moment. And we'll give you 10% and enough just to keep you quiet. And while we build these other things, because even when we say these neighborhood organizations, let's look behind the scenes. It's not the West Bayfront that's buying up these properties. It is a big finance. Some will say Gannon, some will say Erie Insurance. It's the same players. We know who these people are. However, are their intentions truly equity? And I'm not going to say that it is. It has to be done in their view, their way.
Right.
Or a way that, quote unquote, okay, I'll say a way that they're comfortable with.
Right.
And they still don't see certain groups as responsible, intelligent enough to value, or do they have value in what we say or whatever? Because when I still see despite all the talk of diversity, equity, and all this, I still see when the shovels are digging that first picture, majority of the pictures look the same as they did 20 years ago, as far as I'm concerned. It may be a woman. It may be a woman. And that took progress. Bravo. But yet, it's still the same. And that's why when you get apathy in the community, and you try to build community input, and you try to get community support, it's not there because they don't believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's the same thing. We might call it something different, community schools, whatever we call it, it's still the same result. We have to control it. There's no indigenous control whatsoever, and I'm going to bring up that word colonizer type mentality it.
That's right.
And that's what it is. You're not even, you're taking input for the facade of saying, hey,
right,
we heard you, but why don't we look at this plan right here, though?
Right.
That you already preordained, that you already have done, and you have nothing that was said there. here. And your priorities and the community's priorities are misplaced, in my opinion.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was on, and it's all a matter of public record. It's been quoted in the newspaper. I was on the board of the United Way once upon a time. And, you know, when I left the board, one of the things I said on the record, it's in the minutes somewhere, is that you brought up community schools. I said, this can't be a jobs program for white women. The only qualified folk we're finding for this really good annual salary to work with this school district that is majority black and brown students now, the only qualified applicants we can find are white women. Come on. And so it's in certain areas, it's the pendulum is swinging certain directions so flagrantly, so blatantly, that it really we have to have a conversation about it. We can't be in a place where things play out a certain way consistently, and then if somebody says it, you upset. Well, then we need to have the conversation, because again, I go back to it. You look at a starting salary, and again, it's public knowledge, of $50,000 plus. The only people that you can find that want that salary is white women.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And I know they've been looking at that since then, but it goes back to it. United Way wasn't even in the space of social services all like that once upon a time.
Yes.
You know? And now all of a sudden there's big money being poured into these schools via community schools, and now you got a big player at the table, and lo and behold, the positions of influence do not look like us, when the school district that they're serving has systematically become more and more and more black and brown. Yes. Over the years. And so the demographics are changing. It's still a jobs program for other folks. Those are the kind of things where you almost get excoriated for not feigning ignorance and acting like or blindness. I don't see it. I don't notice it. Yes, we notice it. Can we talk about it? And if they are the only ones applying, you need to do something about that. You know, there's no Hispanic males with the master's degree. There's no black males with the master's. There's no Asian lady with the master's. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. You know, so neighborhood development, all of these things. But Mark, you touched on it. These are the kind of things that come up when you say we need community input. Come on, you're going to do what you want to do at the end of the day anyways.
Yes.
You want us to come one by one and say stuff like this and complain. So you go, oh, these people just complain. My God. You're going to go and do what you want to do anyways. So all that to say, that is definitely going to be a show. So we're going to see if we can get that brother on the show, because it's not an Erie thing. This is something I've heard from brothers doing neighborhood development in areas in and around Atlanta, Charlotte, Boston. Doesn't matter. It's the same narrative. It's like gentrification. It's the same narrative.
And again, how many times does Erie have to be told about itself? I mean, Edison had asked me to come to this or whatever, but here's my point. We have articulate, intelligent people here. You had a newspaper article. When I first got here, I served on it was the Children in Poverty Commission. This was the early 90s. Erie had the worst poverty rate amongst the urban blacks in this country. Okay, that was the 90s. Okay, 20s come in, the 2000s rather. The bridge, they did an article in USA Today that talked about this overpass on the east side that Michael Keyes was so passionate about, and people like that was showing the neglect in certain areas of the city, because again, that area, the people there wasn't valued. And the issue wasn't, do we spend the money on the bridge? It was, why was this bridge allowed to decline and decay that way in the first place? Because money was not invested. That wouldn't have happened on the west side. It just wouldn't have happened like that. Okay, so when we ask these things over and over, me personally, and I applaud, I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of people. Sometimes you need an outside voice. But internally, these people are smart enough to know certain things. And it insults my intelligence that we think we need, or someone outside thinks that there's going to be some outsider that comes here and have a revelation that's going to change PNC, City Hall, UPMC, these type of folks, and to change their practices to invest in the community and invest in the people that we have here. Mm-hmm. We have talent here. And then that's why we have a brain drain. If you say it's not here, one of the reasons is because there's no opportunity for those type of folks to shine, because you shunned them. When we ask these kids to graduate from collegiate or graduate from wherever and get these degrees, these diplomas, all this, where do they go? I applaud the Corey Cooks or those type of opportunities, but what I'm saying is it's not enough. We still have a lot and a long way to go. And we're not acknowledging logical roadblocks that are out there. We've been redlined. We've been damaged. So when you say to a business to have this score, you know they've already been harmed by past practices, so you can't do the same traditional lending and those type of things to solve those problems. You have to make exceptions to the rules. Mm-hmm. And some people act like they don't understand that, but that's economics 101.
Yeah.
As Dr. King said, you went to Oklahoma, you gave the land. Not only did you give the land, you created a land grant school. Not only did you give the school, you gave money for the seeds. Not only did you give money for the seeds, you gave money for the equipment. But yet, when we ask for the same thing, it's not there.
Yeah.
They said, where you get that idea from? It's sad.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it'll be a whole show, and before I throw it to Chuck,
Yeah, it'll be a whole show. It'll be a couple of shows.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of stuff to talk about there.
I'll say to the outsider thing, and we're guilty of it, and mainstream here is guilty of it. The other man's ice is colder. You know what I'm saying? The ice is colder. You're absolutely right.
An expert is always somebody who lives 100 miles away.
Lives 100 miles away. Yeah. And I've gone to seminars and places. I can name off the top of my head, 10 brothers that I know, ourselves included, that could garner, and sometimes I do, that could garner a nice fee to speak, and people be like, my goodness, the knowledge, the experience in any place but Erie. Any place but, if I didn't live in Erie and was never in Erie, I'd be the perfect candidate for a keynote at the King Center.
Yes.
But I'm from here, and people have watched me do whatever I've done, and it's like,
You know what? It's kind of human nature. What
they did it to Jesus.
Prophet is not without honor, except for in his own country. So, yeah, that's part of it. But and people are operating out of this mindset or these ways of looking at the world, worldviews that prevent them from, actively work against them actually looking at themselves and at the situations in which they are and asking questions. Mm-hmm. So we just operate the way we always have. And we make the assumption that the way we always have is fine. It's good. It's the way it should be. And when you start doing the kinds of things that you did at the Eagle's Nest the other day, or on your program with Curtis, you become the guy who's asking them hard questions. And those hard questions are, I mean, again, human history, human nature. The prophets in the Old Testament were the people who did that to the culture in which they lived, and they asked some really hard questions, and so they ended up being killed or thrown down wells or kicked out of the country, or because people didn't want to deal with those questions. The same power dynamics that existed there exist today. It's about humanity and human nature, and how do we go to the next level? How do we evolve or grow to be people who can see through other folks' lenses, other folks' glasses? And you may be the smartest guy in the world, but if my lens excludes you from being intelligent, then I don't benefit from you.
Right.
You might be the wrong gender, and so women ain't smart. Women can't do politics.
Right.
And we're finding all of that is BS.
Right.
And so we're in a good time in this world, relatively speaking, because a lot of those conventions are being broken. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are opening their eyes to things that they never saw before. Women are stepping, in fact, into leadership. And black women are being maybe just fronted so that we can look at them and say, hey, look at the progress. But we're seeing the intelligence and the capabilities of people who are not just white guys.
Right. And to say, when, I've done the thing before, so trust me more, that's not, sometimes doing things differently from a different vantage point is not a weakness or a liability. And because you did it from your vantage point successfully doesn't mean you should automatically be the one to do it for everybody else.
But you're going to ask the question, successfully for who?
Exactly.
So, I mean, you did it successfully for you. and maybe for your people, but did you do it successfully in a way that allowed buy-in and participation and stakeholdership for the mass, for people everywhere, for us all? And that's the thing that I think is missing. And it's a question about how business gets done that needs to be asked, I think. Is business just, and this is the conversation we were having, is business just about making money?
It's just about making money.
It ain't.
I always just said the will. When the mayor running, I think the mayor's a good guy. And I do think he was thinking he was on a war against, how he said, racism. He said, and I thought it was a very ambitious plan. He said, I want to end racism in the area. That was his thing. And Mayor Senate is everywhere. I'll give him all kudos to that. But what are you willing to do different?
Shimber,
I'm sorry. What are you willing to do different? And I asked him at one time, we had all these meetings meetings again. And my thing is, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to commit to this? Because here's the question. This is what happens all the time. I don't care who Edison brings in, who you brings in to say whatever we say. You already know. Let's not act like we don't know what the problem is.
That is true.
It's insulting my intelligence.
Yes.
It doesn't. We have brilliant CEOs here. We have that, but we act like when it comes to this problem that we have in Erie, we'll have these town hall meetings, and the emphasis or the ideas have to come from, quote unquote, that group of people, and they'll say, well, we hear you, we hear you, we hear you. Then they'll take their notes or they'll do whatever, and then it just fades away. Mm-hmm. And what I'm saying is, where there's a will, you would bring in experts to really solve this, and I have yet to see a real genuine effort and investment. I see partial, but it's not real. When we say we want to change the Bayfront, I literally see it. I see the plan. I know they got the players involved, but when it comes to this over here in our community, I don't see the same intensity that I see as I do a football team in Utah trying to find black players all over the country to be a better football team. Where there's a will, there's a way. Somehow they seem to find those. They seem to recruit those. If you want it, you'll recruit it.
You'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
You'll figure out. Chuck, what's on your list? We all came to the table with a couple things that we've been kind of scoping out lately. That was the thing I wanted to lead with. What are you leading with?
It's a good question. I mean, there's so many things. You know, we talk about this all the time. There's a million issues. But what do you think about what's going on college campuses today?
That's on my list. I scratch that off.
So I heard this morning, I think. Tell me if you heard the same thing, or if I got this wrong. I heard that Biden was saying to Netanyahu, I am not giving you any more bombs.
That's what I heard.
Okay, unless you can assure me the safety of the Palestinian people. I'm thinking to myself, and so I'm sitting at the coffee shop here, and people talk about this, and people are talking about it. Well, it's anti-Semitic to say that. Joe, is Biden anti-Semitic?
Is that what the narrative was?
That's part of the narrative in some people's minds, and can you be? I don't know what's going on the college campuses in terms of violence because I ain't there. So the stuff that you see on the news, if you're Fox News and you want to promote the violent protests that are happening, you just show a couple of people doing violent stuff, and that's all you show. You don't show the thousands of other kids who are peacefully protesting. Same thing we did with Black Lives Matter movement stuff a couple of years back, and so I don't know for sure, but it looks to me like most of these are very peaceful demonstrations, protests, saying what I've been saying. Which is the Palestinian people, the women and the children and the young people matter, and we just can't let. And I know that it's complicated stuff, but we can advocate for them, and also advocate for the safety of Jews living in the Middle East at the same time.
Right.
We don't have to. It's not one side or the other. It's not exclusionary. So how do you see what's playing out there on the campuses?
I mean, a couple things. One, I know that we invited someone on from the Jewish background to talk about this, and one of the questions was, where do you land on this? and the conversation never materialized, because at the end of the day, it's like, if there's a prerequisite, what's the point, right? I mean, we're allowed to disagree or agree on certain things. In terms of the actual protests, like any other movement, you go back to long before they had social media, whether it was some of these Panther rallies or the civil rights movement, there were subversives in the audience.
Sure.
There were subversives on some of these teams, and they had specific orders, some to try to radicalize, some to go back and give information. Whenever there's a movement of any kind, there are plants among them and people with agendas. So Black Lives Matters, like you pointed out, there was some looting going on. Were they locals who just wanted to loot, or were they a part of the? You never know. You know what I'm saying? You never know.
And we don't dig down
and
to find out.
Dig down to find out. What I do know is young people are trying to completely utilize their voices and say, we know y'all trying to get elected right now, so it's listening time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Then I don't like the terms that is being used, like outside agitators. Like you use the word subversiveness, and I could kind of understand that word if it is being hijacked. But let's look at the root cause. Let's look at what is that implying? Subversive to who? To what would be their objective?
Yeah.
If it's an outside agitator, like the South used to argue, look, our Negroes would be happy if it wasn't for the other Negroes coming in.
I get where you're trying to take it. I get where you're taking it.
So is this what we're saying about the power? Think about what we're saying here.
Yeah.
Are those students rallying about injustice or not? Are they saying it's overkill or not? Does it take an outside agitator to look at that to say something's not right about that? Or let's look at it also, because I'm of this thing. We need to educate ourselves about Zionism and anti-Semitic. Two different issues, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Because you have to say, how did we get here in the first place?
Absolutely.
Because we got here, a lot of people say, you got a lot of people that believe like Israel, that's the motherland, that's the homeland. Okay, but if you look at it historically, it's always been like this turmoil. It is not this Judeo-Christian thing, land given to Moses. It's just not wrapped up that way or whatever. We got to look at what happened in Europe after World War II and what happened to the Palestinians, and understand that it was other options. We could very well be arguing about Uganda right now because that was an option. A lot of people don't even know that.
Yeah.
We could be saying Brazil. That was an option. So this was a man-made, created thing that we have here. Not necessarily, it was based in anti-Semitic type things because they was trying to figure out where to put these people. And historically, this ain't the first time where Europe has tried to say, what do we do with these type people?
Yeah.
A lot of ignorance on the history of that.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a lot of ignorance on the history of that because, one, I think when you start drilling down on it, you start to get a little frustrated is the word. I mean, I've watched and read a lot of different information, some of what you just talked about, and it is a complicated history. The other thing is you start talking about Jews on any level, it's almost like the abortion conversation. Somebody's going to blow their lid on the conversation, at the end of the day. But I think your points are well taken because everything that you're saying is spot on. I think it's interesting that we're at a time right now where with this newer generation, and I think I alluded to this when, or said this when Dr. Harnett from Penn State Barron was on the show. The loyalty as a constituency, the loyalty to Israel for people in this country from a certain age demographic on up. This new generation, they don't like you. It's the motherland, and then people start quoting scripture, I know you know the scripture that I'm talking about.
Yeah, but this generation isn't steeped in the scripture the way previous ones.
At all. And so it's a different animal. And so some of those old school arguments about why we absolutely have to support Israel, these young bucks are like, okay, that's not making sense for me. Right? And so it's just brought a whole new dynamic to it. On the subversives, I go back to my thought process was, is there such thing as people coming into it who don't necessarily agree with you, who set it off so that you look like the person setting it off? And, that's my point, But either way it goes, it's a narrative. I'm interested to see how Biden handles the situation because it is listening time.
Yeah.
It is political season.
Yeah, and it's complicated and difficult no matter what he does. People are going to be angry. There's going to be a lot of material out there that can be used against him. He's going to get a lot of stones thrown at him.
And I want to say this. I think we're going through a fatigue of how do you tell a native folk, because you got a lot of people switching on this issue because of the finance of it.
Yep.
How do we keep spending and sending checks over there? Whether it's Ukraine or what have you. I mean, it's natural. Whether you agree with, look, I agree. The Ukrainians, what's happening to them is wrong. As far as with the information I got, is wrong. What's going on in Palestine, Israel definitely has the right to protect themselves. I have no issue with that. But I also believe in overkill.
Yeah.
I think you've proved your point. You've done what you wanted to do. But how can we cut these checks and send it over here? We can't build schools. We can't have health care. Your city don't have this or that. Well, our infrastructure is collapsing, and the money's not there, we're told.
Literally collapsing in Baltimore.
Yes.
Literally.
And we don't have it to invest in America somehow, communism or socialism, and investing in our people. But to cut these billion-dollar checks for weapons of mass destruction, to go over there, to fight that'll never come back. That'll never come back here. I think there's that crowd there.
Yeah.
That's starting to say, hold on, we can't just keep writing these checks. We're in a deficit.
Those are the kinds of issues that, again, always been with us. So in the lead up to World War II, part of the discussion was, why would we get involved in this thing? Why are we going to waste American money and lives over there? And eventually it came to the point where we couldn't not do it. And the Japanese, and there's a lot of interesting stuff about the attack on Pearl Harbor that is kind of subverted in terms of public knowledge, that might have suggested that America allowed that to happen as a way of getting into the war. And I don't know what I believe about that because I don't know enough, but you're trying to stop something that is particularly evil. And so when you're doing it from across the ocean, and that's one of the things about America, we're so well protected and so far away from many of these matters and these events that it's easy just to close our eyes and say, let's just let them take care of that. But Putin and Ukraine, that's pretty serious business, because we can be pretty sure that Putin gets Ukraine, then there'll be something else. What's next? Poland. And how does that ultimately affect us? We've become more and more a world community, and we can't build walls around the whole country, especially now in a time when I can fly a drone over your house or send a missile across the ocean. We're all connected in ways that maybe we weren't 100 years ago. So we need to pay more attention to what's going on in the whole world around us and how we can have a positive influence. There was this great speech made to Congress, joint session of Congress not too long ago, by the Japanese Prime Minister. And he said, this is some of the things that he said. He said, U.S. policy in the past has always been based on the premise that humanity does not want to live oppressed by an authoritarian state, where you are tracked and surveilled and denied from expressing what's in your heart and on your mind. He said, you, in America, have always believed that freedom is the oxygen of humanity. And then he finished up by saying, freedom and democracy are currently under threat around the globe. He named a bunch of reasons for that. He talked about climate change and global pandemics and the rapid increase in AI. But he said, in the midst of all of this incredibly dramatic change, which is one of the things that drives people's fears, in the midst of all of this, the leadership of the United States leading to a better world, a safer world, is indispensable. And I think I agree with that. And I don't know what that exactly looks like played out or in particular. But if we abandon Ukraine, if we turn our backs on the Palestinian people, I think we do our own legacy and our own people damage. We harden ourselves, we turn our backs, we become a less compassionate society.
But here lies the problem with that. And that's romantic, and that sounds.
It is, I know.
That sounds great. But against all those elegant words that he just said, we had slavery. We was fighting wars. We had German soldiers that had more rights than African American soldiers. We had Rwanda. We had Uganda. So whose life is worth this?
Yeah.
And so if that was the case, if we were driven by humanity and freedoms and all these type of things, we would be all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
it's not consistent. So I don't necessarily believe these are the things that we're worried about as far as democracy and freedoms, when we know certain things, when we dealing with Saudi Arabia or what have you, and some of the things that go over there with women's rights or whatever, we don't treat them the same way as we say we're so against communism and we send people over there and we got to send money over there to fight against it. They're too selective for that type of rhetoric to be used.
Yeah.
Just be honest with us and tell us why you're over there.
I guess I imagine, a well-meaning man talking to another family, and you and the wife are on the brink of divorce and on financial ruin, or having financial issues. The son is having issues with drugs, and the kids are fighting, and they're educationally they're tanking. It's just a lot of things going wrong. You got some things going right, but you got a lot of the important things going wrong. And the wife and kids watch you give good counsel to another couple and then follow that good counsel up with a check to help them get on their feet. You're going to get a lot of side eyes in the room.
While you're ignoring your own family.
That's all I think. In that respect, I think that's where we are as a country, because on the surface, it's from a historic standpoint, I get everything that you said and I get how you get to that place. The part that's hard to ignore is we're at civil war. Poverty is not going anywhere. These gaps are getting wider between rich and poor. Things are not going well in America, so much so, and I'm going here in a little bit, our political cycle is a dumpster fire. And it's noticed. I read something before from the Chinese, right, about we witnessing the fall of America, and y'all poo-pooed it. I'm going there in a minute or two. And you look at Russia and all of their attacks on America digitally during the last election cycle. They know we're at civil war. They know we're at the verge of falling apart as a nation internally. Take money out of it, and I think that's what people have. That's the hard pill to swallow when we're giving aid on a mass scale to other people's issues. It is a global community, but it's and you said before, freedom is messy.
Yeah.
It's just messy. It is really messy right now.
And I think one of the things that struck me while you were talking, Mark, we make certain assumptions about the scarcity of resources.
Yeah.
And so we have to make decisions about where we're going to spend these scarce resources. I have always been of the opinion there are a lot more resources available than we think.
We agree there.
We just have those resources locked up in just a few people. And until we can unlock those resources, and I think there's lots of ways we can do that. I think Biden did a little bit of that with his what did they call the restructuring of America thing, or when we started giving out help to middle and lower middle class Americans.
Did the Build Back Better? Is that his?
Well, that was his phrase at election time. But in the aftermath of the pandemic, when people were unemployed and when they didn't have an
American Rescue Plan?
That's it, the American Rescue Plan. The American economy grew at 3 times the rate of any other Western economy during these years. Mm-hmm. Nobody else did that kind of investment in their people, and it paid off here in America. And there were other things that were results of that. The inflation problem was an issue, but wages for the lowest, for everybody except for the top 20% in America, who had been continuing to grow their wages since Reagan, for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Theirs are the only wages that didn't increase over the last 5 years. Everybody else's have. For the first time since Ronald Reagan, the wages of people in the lower economic levels have increased. There are things we can do. And I think the will is not there because we have one of our parties that's ensconced in taking care of the top 20% or the top 5%. And there's so much wealth locked up there. If we can unlock resources, we can make a much bigger difference.
And just to piggyback off of what you said, I'm getting old. Hence why we have inflation right now. Because while that was freezing that you said happened, what is going on now is it's time to give me what I got to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
Because McDonald's and all those people that had to raise that minimum wage have raised their prices now, and they are making more money than they ever have in their lives. All these corporate people are making more money than they ever had, but yet they're saying their cost has went up. Yet they're telling you now, hey, we can't pay you this right here. We got to hold up right here. But they're making more money than they ever had, and that's the things that I wish people would pay attention to.
Mark, I'm gonna stay with you for a second because I started to show out. Okay, this is the thing I wanna talk about first. Chuck introduced his. Let's go to your thing. And listen, we are 40 minutes at this. You never have to show prep when the three of us get together.
No, we don't need 3 issues each because we're going to talk forever about one.
So, Mark, what's yours?
Mine, I'm gonna regress a little bit. I'm going entertainment over the weekend because I want to be current.
That's not
right
regressive.
here.
That's a part of the national narrative.
Because this is serious. That's world. We talking World War I, Civil War versus this entertainment thing. But
I got
it's
WNBA
culture.
on my list.
It's culture. Kendrick and Drake.
Oh Lord!
Over the weekend, there was this battle. To people who don't know Kendrick and Drake,
Kendrick Lamar.
They're rappers, very gigantic rappers, and we had a battle rap that I think changed the music industry and revealed a lot about our culture. Whereas these gentlemen probably made more money over the weekend without a record studio ever. The streams, a beat called BBL Drake has been one of the most streamed sounds or songs of all time over the weekend based off of this right here.
This beef.
Or you're not us, whatever Kendrick said. You're not one of us. That was the top song this year streamed over a weekend. And the money split doesn't go to the studio. That's an industrial change, and that shows you the power of this culture or the influence of this social media. And I'm like, wow. Then also we have the cultural war of, again, I guess, who is black, who could say certain words, who can't. And I found that interesting right there. So in the hip-hop world, it was a big shift or big event this weekend.
Yeah, from
and I like both of them, actually.
Yeah. I mean,
different reasons.
It looks like Kendrick Lamar is coming out on top based on what all these other young bucks are saying, and
lyrically, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
I would go Kendrick, but we have to understand he won a Pulitzer. He is a lyricist.
Yeah.
However, Drake is a club banger, and Kendrick, in my opinion, delivered the final blow with a club banger. And when he goes there and he add the lyrics on top, I got him winning.
So let me ask you this then, Mark, while we were talking about hip hop. What is the hottest diss track of all time to you? Or one of the hottest?
No Vaseline and hit him up.
Man, you guys are talking
is true.
Greek to me. Who does no Vaseline? Do I want to know about this?
That would have been Ice Cube.
Oh, okay.
That would have been Ice Cube.
Hit him up with Pac because this is real personal. And then I would say Kendrick's is definitely up there. Before that, Here's What We Think About You.
Yeah.
With NWA. However, what the hope was, see, this is why this is important. We had this beef battle or whatever. We were hoping it didn't turn out into the Biggie and the Tupac ending.
Yeah, these beefs end up in murder.
With the violence. So far it's been relatively tame, but yesterday it was a bodyguard shot at Drake's own house, a drive-by at a mansion.
See.
So when you have these type of events right here, you worry is this entertainment, and will it stay in the entertainment field? Because if you see J. Cole, which is one of my favorites, J. Cole got out of it real quick because he said, this ain't even in my spirit. I'm not going to do this because of what this could lead to. And some of the things that was said in by both of these gentlemen was very personal.
Yeah, well, that's what
very personal.
Yeah, I mean, well, let me say this: my favorite of all time is probably Ether, Nas to Jay-Z.
Yes,
that was ugly.
Yes, yes.
But Nas is a lyricist. Not that Jay-Z isn't, but that was, and I think Jay-Z just quietly backed out of the battle after that because Ether was so complete lyrically. The stuff he talked about. I remember Sway on MTV going on the air and saying, "Listen, I just heard Ether. Jay, take my advice. Don't respond, bro. Just let it go." Because it was that much of a whooping on wax. But speaking of talking about personal things, let me segue into something else that is pop culture. The roast of Tom Brady.
I love it.
Did you see this?
I did not. I saw some excerpts and things.
It was, and I say this in all sincerity. I am not trying to be. It was so mean spirited, and roasts normally are.
Yeah.
This was so mean spirited. I struggled to watch. I couldn't watch the whole thing. At some point, I just had to fast forward to Tom's closing remarks. It was mean.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mean. I mean, some of the jokes, the joke about. Was Ron Goldman that was killed with Nicole Brown Simpson, and Kevin Hart said something about one less waiter. The one dude was so fat you didn't care that he got killed. You was mad there was one less waiter. I'm like that.
And I love Kevin Hart, but that was despicable.
That was despicable. The stuff said about Giselle. I'm like, they got kids. They got kids.
Yeah.
It just was way overboard. And they're like, Tom, why would you sign up for this? I'm thinking, yeah, why would you sign up for this? Here's my theory before I throw it to y'all. Because in the end, when Tom had his say, he took a shot at Bill Belichick sneaking out on that Ring camera. You remember that?
Yes.
I thought to myself, after listening to it, again, couldn't listen in its totality, Tom Brady, and this is a speculation, and these are my thoughts, not the thoughts of WQLN. I'm thinking, open-ended question, did Tom Brady use this to take shots at folks that he really want to take shots at and was allowing other people to do it? Because he knew that the worst he would get is jokes about how sexy he is.
Yeah.
The worst he would get would be about his ex-wife, about his ex-coach, and his ex-owner. So I'm thinking to myself, did he just make a dump truck load of money by letting other people do his dirty work? Because that's all I could see, which would still be jacked up because you got kids. I don't know. All I know is I couldn't watch, man. It was crude. It was mean. Man, oh, man.
It reflected the tenor of the culture right now, man.
Really
It was
did.
not cool.
However, just my personal belief about Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady is laying the groundwork for his political career.
I think you are right.
And this is the new Jack Kemp. And he's doing it in a way, he's building his base. He's appearing to be hip.
And relatable.
And relatable. Because you know who he's friends with.
Yeah.
I know what party he belongs to, probably who he's affiliating himself with. But he's now crossing over. Tom Brady is a brand. And I think this is, in my opinion, Tom Brady is a very calculating person.
Yes.
He's very meticulous with his image. And he would not put himself in a situation that he didn't think he would benefit from.
There's a purpose to it.
This guy his diet is impeccable when he's locked in. This is what he's known for. So I just think this was a calculated move to move forward with his bigger agenda.
Yeah. Well, let me do it like this. I know we said let me throw this out. We know who he's good friends with. He's orange.
Yeah.
His hair is kind of nest-like.
Yes.
And one Stormy Daniels stormed the witness stand this week. I'm looking at this Trump. Let me go to a couple of quotes though, and I didn't get a chance to pull them, because when I was reading that thing from a Chinese consulate and they talk about the fall of America, and I was like, the January 6th thing is one thing. He is now publicly calling these people hostages.
Heroes.
And heroes. Publicly, he's now saying this. He is now calling immigrants trying to cross the border. He's calling them animals. He even clarified his language. No, that's the word I'm going to use. That's what they are. He clarified that. He also, when interviewed about is there going to be violence if you don't get reelected, he said, and I quote, it depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, it depends on whether I win or not.
That's the and I'm thinking to myself, we are in new territory. He has now figured out I can just uncloak this whole thing, and they'll stick with me. I think about Hoffa and tax evasion, right? It's the thing that brought him down.
Oh, you're talking about Capone.
Capone, I'm sorry, Capone.
Yeah.
Capone.
Yeah,
It's the thing that brought him down. All of this dirt, tax evasion got you. This trial, which of all the trials seemed like the most irrelevant trial, I'm looking at this thing play out like, is this the thing that puts a chink in your armor more than all the rest of this? I don't know. What are you guys thinking when you see all of this? But the brazenness, I just wanted to put that out there for public consumption. He's making it clear who, and he's already said publicly, I will be your retribution. When he talked about all of these who happen to be African-American prosecutors that were after him, that he would get them back when this was all set. He's been showing his hand to people.
I don't think you have to guess at what Donald Trump thinks and what Donald Trump wants to do. I know. What do you think, Mark?
I'm with you 100%. And even if we're wrong, think about this. Here's a guy, how many times was he divorced? How many businesses were successful? Yes. Bankrupt guy, every business he ever had. But people think he's the art of the deal. Okay, I want to go to this. I walk right up to him and smack him in the what?
Yeah, grab him in the what?
And that, if you could say that and still do this, what can't you think you could say? So what I think it is, this is the only hope I got. And when I say I don't hope you don't win, but what I'm saying is this. In the back of my mind, I think this guy thinks he could pull it back. He's doing what it takes that he thinks that it takes to win. And I think he thinks he could pull it back and quote unquote save us from this thing, because he's going to say it's good people on both sides, that type of speech. Where you could cater to this group and cater to that group. Because I don't think anybody knows what Donald Trump is except Donald Trump and what his next move is. He can't be managed. People that thought they could manage General Kelly.
Yeah.
General Kelly thought he could, and when he got close, he said, oh my God.
Yeah.
Or whatever. You can't manage this guy.
Yeah.
What drives Donald Trump, do you think?
Power. I don't even think it's money. I think it's power.
Yeah, I think money is a subsidiary of power. Yeah. But I also think that Donald Trump is driven by an insatiable need to be the guy.
Oh, yeah.
To be the boss, to decide who gets fired and who gets the money. And the rest of us right now are living at the mercy. And that's a very sick sort of unhealthy, destructive way of being. He's like the 6-year-old little boy who don't get his way, and so he kicks and screams and manipulates.
He does.
You and I are now living at the mercy of Donald Trump's really unhealthy need.
That is an interesting way of
unhealthy
looking at it,
need,
Chuck.
and he drives everything around him around that. He don't care about other people. He does not care about the country. He doesn't. He wants to be the man.
That's an excellent point.
That's it. He wants to be, and this is what we're seeing now with a lot of the comparisons he makes to Jesus. He wants to be worshipped.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And power is maybe a way to that. Money is a way to that, but that's what he wants ultimately.
Well, you're making me think about the 6-year-old throwing the tantrum at the nice restaurant that we've all paid good money to be at, and the parents just don't want to do anything or can't do anything. To use your words, we are now hostages. I'm sitting at $100 a plate dinner. Now I'm your hostage. Your 6-year-old's hostage because you can't control them. Yeah. That is an interesting way of looking at this thing, Chuck.
Extend that.
Look at his pardon list.
Say that again.
Look
at pardon list.
Look at his pardon list.
Yeah, to include his son-in-law's father.
There you go. To include Kodak Black.
Yeah.
Lil Wayne.
Yeah.
And these are calculated moves, and this is telling you who this guy is. And when I say that, I'm not saying that these guys didn't deserve to be pardoned. That's not my point. Mm-hmm. My point is he doesn't do anything by chance.
He intuitively knows
He
what
knows
serves
what
his
he's
cause.
doing. He's pandering. This is what he does.
Yeah.
And he wants to look good to the hip hop world under his conditions.
Yeah.
And they have to be his way. Oh,
Yeah. And you know, in the hip hop, you're back in the day, because he was a symbol of money and power. He's actually, you go and listen to a lot of old school hip hop on the positive. He's in a lot of those songs.
you kidding me?
Oh no, I'm serious.
Whoa.
He was looked upon as a business icon, and the brothers talked about him all the time.
This is why Russell Simmons wrote a personal letter to him via the Post or New York Times and said, you know this is not who you are.
Yeah.
But he gave you the blueprint. He said it back then. I'm a Democrat, but if I was to run for president, I would do this. And I would run and he's executing that to the T.
He is.
And people underestimated that.
What trips me out is, to this very second, there is a distinct pattern of those that lay their souls on the altar of Trump. They either end up in financial ruin, in jail, or hitting him with a huge bill that he refuses to pay, and they're taking him to court. It's very Rudy Giuliani.
I was just thinking that.
Michael Cohen, and the list goes. I mean, to this very second. And the most telling thing is, and the Stormy Daniels thing, the creepy thing they talked about on CNN, how he told Stormy Daniels, "You remind me of my daughter." Everybody knows he has an unhealthy obsession with his daughter. But that being said, I do think, and I've said it before, that she's the smart one, of this clan, and the most civilized one of this clan. And you notice, from the very beginning, she said, Jared and I will be sitting this one out.
Yeah.
Right? From the very beginning. And you have not seen her. She like, we got a life outside of this. This is a dumpster fire. I'm rich. I got a name. I don't need this.
Yeah.
Right? And so to me, that's the most telling, because he's her greatest fan and she his.
Yes.
And she made the conscious decision, I'm sitting this out. When she did that, I said, that should tell all the people closest to him something. Like, your biggest cheerleader is not here anymore? Ugh.
But when all you care about, as you hang on to Donald Trump, is getting dragged along with his popularity and his power and his... There's a really interesting quote that made me think about something. Do we even have time to talk more?
Yes, you do. Yeah, this is not the first Sunday of the month show.
Okay. So Mike Johnson is talking about some of the legislation that the
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House, some of the legislation that they are putting out there about election integrity. And they're going to protect the integrity of the next election. And he said, this is a little quote as part of that. He said, we all knew intuitively that illegals were voting in ridiculous numbers in the election. We knew it, but we can't prove it. It's not easily provable. We knew it in our guts. And that's the basis upon which people are operating today.
Yeah.
The question I wanted to ask of the group is, how do you talk to people who just say, well, I have the feeling that Trump is God's guy? You can point out all of the stuff about the tape and the grabbing and the divorces and
Is that a real question, Chuck?
it is a real question.
You can't. Listen, we have found out the hard way in society right now. People have their heels dug in, man. And on this particular thing, I'm going to regurgitate something I've said before. I do think something spiritual is going on. I just don't think it's what people think, because it does defy human logic.
Yeah.
When it goes against human logic, I'm always like, all right, something's going on here that we don't know, because there is no logic to it. I mean, I've got people in my orbit that are still supporters of Donald Trump, and when you ask certain things, when they know it's wrong, that's the card they play. Yeah. Oh, I don't have to invite him to dinner. Oh, okay. Or I just think it's stolen. I watched something about it was a documentary on, I want to say it's on Hulu, about the White House and hip hop. I don't know if you saw it. Waka Flocka Flame was on there. He's a rapper, and he supports Trump. And they got to a point in this because they talked about the hip hop influence from the Reagan era all the way forward. They're interviewing different people from these different hip hop eras. And when they get to him, he's a Trump supporter. And they gave him time to unpack that. And they were like, do you think the election is stolen? He was like, yeah. So it's not limited, right? When people are convicted that that's what it is what it is.
Yeah, I want to know, though, and this goes back to my, when we first started doing this stuff,
Yeah.
my podcast was called Why? Why the hell do people...
I don't know.
So for me, it comes down to you and me as people who can step back and look a little bit at ourselves and be somewhat introspective, do some honest evaluation of ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the norm. And so people are just operating on autopilot. And when you start, Donald Trump, he's my guy. And now everything that happens gets filtered in or out based on whether it makes him look better or not. And so you don't even hear the stuff about the divorces and the sexual escapades. And
Doesn't matter.
you write it off as fake news,
Yeah, it
or
doesn't
it doesn't matter. But how do we... It's objectively true. The reality is the guy's been divorced several times. He's on his third wife. He's had multiple affairs. He's no more an example of a Christian man than Attila the Hun was.
Yeah.
But the Christian right is glommed onto him as their guy.
Help me out here. Who was the politician whose background was almost to a letter fictitious and made up?
George, what was his name? The congressman from New York?
Yeah.
He's from New York.
Right.
Yes.
And what did he say? He would not step down. He fought tooth and nail. You know he was lying, which is what they're doing nowadays, right? I'm not stepping down. You got to figure out a way to get me out of here. We go back to when Bill Clinton was found out with Monica Lewinsky, and they had a field day on that. And then you had, at the time, that Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House. And so lo and behold, we find out Newt has a woman on the side. Newt was like, damn. Newt Gingrich is stepping down. Newt was like, well, I'm going to step down here. And, let's stay focused on the party. And Bob Livingston takes over. And then lo and behold, Bob got a chair on the side. And then Bob was like, well, Bob, I'm going to step down. Stay focused on the party. Ain't nobody stepping down.
No.
That has become, he has ushered in a new norm that people have wanted to have as a new norm for the longest. It goes back to Josh Hawley when he was walking past the protesters and he threw his fist up like, yeah. Even though they're yelling hang Pence, they're storming it. He's like, yeah. And I'm thinking, y'all not going to do nothing about that. It is Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Acting a fool, and it's okay. So, and that added to the fact, and then I'll throw it back to the group, is we talked about, because of AI, the whole notion of what's real is hard to decode. You see an article, I've seen articles that I ran with in my mind only to find out, oh man, that was fake. You see photos, that was fake. You see videos. And so when fake news, brilliant line, because there is a lot of fake news floating around out here.
There is.
And it's just an easy out for people who want to say, basically, I believe it because I want to. And there's a lot of fake news out there. And they got that because there is.
Yeah. I saw this story this morning about Matt Gaetz. And there's a picture out there of him, photograph of him in a Tigger outfit, in a Tigger costume, and it's fake. Everybody's talking about how fake it is, and I haven't seen the picture. I don't know whether it's unflattering or why it's a big issue, but it's just an illustration of the fact that we can make an image of you, and we can make it look whatever we want to. We can create a reality with AI and photoshopping, and we can generate your voice.
Oh yeah,
artificially, so that we can have you saying some things, and people won't be able to distinguish what is real and what is not as we move forward. That's another whole conversation about artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah,
I think what also has happened is I'm gonna spin it just a little bit. I've always asked some people when we start talking about Donald Trump. Some people say he's the worst president we ever had. Some people say whatever. And I asked them, what's the difference between him and the past presidents? And I think if people had access to the information that we have of Donald Trump, you see there's a lot of similarities in past presidents. If you say he's a racist, you think he's the first racist president we ever had?
Yeah.
If you say he was a womanizer, you think he's the first womanizer president we ever had?
One of the ones we love them, a couple of them that we love the most.
Some of them pictures on many families' wall. So when we say these things, I think what also has happened, the pushback is more informed and more vocal. Before, you didn't have access to be vocal to push it back. Like he aligned himself. Rush Limbaugh once called Trump, said he wasn't conservative enough. He's not real conservative. It went from that to Trump giving him the Medal of Freedom Award, and Trump saying, and Limbaugh saying he the best president of all time. What I'm saying is they knew they balanced these acts, and they doubled down. Trump is a Nixon fulfilled. Nixon was the same way. Nixon said, I couldn't make being black illegal, so I made drugs illegal. The war on drugs is war on blacks.
Yeah.
This is nothing new, and we acting like this is new. This is not new stuff.
It is not.
Trump knows what he's doing. This is the Southern strategy doubled down on.
Yeah.
It was started a long time ago. So this new stuff where he's doing these things, and this has always been here.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the people that are fighting against it.
Yeah.
But I think the masses didn't know this.
Right.
So it makes it look like if you think that election, there's some people that the Kennedy election, the Republican Party felt it was stolen then.
Yeah, it's
And
not new.
there might be some, they say people voted in Chicago 18 times.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or West Virginia vote. And we had this information out there. And so now they've latched onto that conspiracy. And so when the public does these things or what have you, I think there's two things happening. Trump is a unique individual as far as that is concerned. And he knows how to exploit certain things. But I don't want people thinking that what he does is so different.
Yeah, so far
because
out.
it's more of the same. It wasn't Trump that said this. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Yeah.
Who I compare Biden with. To me, they're almost like, here's an older guy, their last chance at glory. And they came with the civil rights thing. Okay. You could talk about Floyd and you could talk about after Martin. Johnson has to deal with the civil rights thing after Kennedy is gone. He comes up with a New Deal type situation. Here comes Biden after COVID. He comes up with Rebuild America. And then there's this pushback in both parties. Vietnam happens here. Israel and Ukraine happens here.
Okay, Mark, I'm
They
picking up what
both
you
are
putting
doing
down.
the same thing.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
One term. One term. Johnson was older, and so is Biden. And they're running against what? A conservative person. Nixon is coming now. Nixon said the civil rights movement went too far.
Yeah.
And they played on white fear. What is Trump doing? What is Trump doubling down on? This is nothing new. This is what I want to say to people. It's nothing new.
good
And until
perspective.
we accept this and understand what our country was, and that now, Cat Williams said it on his new one on Netflix, and I'm going to be done with it. This is the best time in America in some cases. You could love who you want to love. You could do it. Might be objective to you. You might say, ugh. You can say certain things that you've never been able to say. You can fight back. But those same things that we've been fighting against are still there, and that's the tragedy.
Amen. And that's part of the stuff that I want to bring up all the time is this is the way human beings operate. And so people of privilege, they operate in a different sphere than the rest of us. So FDR has his mistress on the side, and he and Eleanor have an arrangement, and we don't even say much about it, even when it gets known. And even Woodrow Wilson, who the heck would have an affair with Woodrow Wilson? But even Woodrow Wilson had a woman.
Yeah.
On so it's just kind of part of the fabric of being humans.
Can I ask you something on that, Chuck? Can you put your pastoral hat on?
Yeah, sure.
And I get an opinion from you? If there is an agreed upon arrangement, is it adultery?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that, baby.
I mean, you got two consenting adults.
Biblically, that's the question.
This is what I'm asking. Is that, do we parse it out like that?
Biblically, it is.
Okay.
Because you can't, if you married, this is Leviticus. Leviticus says you are, because you got an agreement of marriage on both sides or one side. Actually, it didn't apply to the men. It applied to the woman when that was first written.
So in Leviticus, written at a time when people had multiple wives. So
Definitely.
that's a whole, I think our sexual norms and mores are constructed as we go along.
Yeah.
And we may look at the Bible to prove that the ones we choose are the right ones.
Yeah.
I would say that what the Bible is really all about, and I struggle with this. When I first became a pastor, we were really struggling in my denomination with the ordination of gays and marrying gays, and what did it look like to do same-sex relationships, and we'd been dealing with it for a generation before I came on board. And when I came on, I was really sympathetic to the same-sex stuff. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be accepting. My heart went out to those folks, but I would have been kicked out of the denomination, and so I kept my peace for a while. And slowly but surely, as I gained some sense of my own authority and strength and power, I came to say, I don't think that's right. We should allow these people to serve. We should love all people and let them love who they want to love.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at today. And if you have an arrangement with the woman who you are officially married to that says, yeah, you can do that over there, and this is becoming a thing today, much more openly than it used to be.
There's two different terms. See, you got to talk like a lawyer when you're dealing with theology.
How did we get here, man?
Yes,
all you. Yes.
What's on your mind, Mark?
What the hell
you
were
really
you
want to
thinking?
I took it down the rabbit hole because when you said they had an arrangement, I'm saying to myself, okay, that is, that's a thing nowadays. You're talking about in this day and age. Marriage has a lot of definitions when it comes to consenting, and you got polyamory now.
I know,
where you got 3 people in a consensual relationship. You got swinging. You got all kinds of stuff. So I'm like, all right, and I'll just throw it out there. It was a Pandora's box. I put it back in the box and shut the lid.
There are people in this town who we could bring on this program who would talk to you about polyamory and.
I guarantee.
Which, by the way, was what Abraham was doing and Moses was doing. Yeah. They were in polyamorous relationships.
Yeah, they were.
Definitely.
They were.
Concubines.
And so I do want to go to the finish line on the impact of the WNBA. I interviewed Mashia Williams about the Caitlin Clark effect. Mm-hmm. And Mashia was a great interview. I mean, the sister's got a phenomenal record when it comes to basketball herself, coming straight out of Erie, Mercyhurst, Penn State, played against some of the best, played overseas, Erie Hall of Fame. I mean, Mashia Williams was the real deal with that basketball. And then obviously we got Kayla McBride, who's still at Minnesota, killing it right now at a high level, stellar background and resume herself. Mark, I'm going to start with you, man. What are your thoughts on just the trajectory of the WNBA? You can add in the Caitlin Clark effect. Now we're talking about they have chartered planes now instead of going to the airports, which is long overdue. What's your thoughts on all of this now?
I'm thinking she's a transcending athlete like Tiger was to golf. Let's flip this for a minute. There's the resentment that she's getting more attention than everybody else.
Absolutely.
And we all know the contrast. Okay, is she the Larry Bird of the situation, or someone that could salvage this from being uninteresting? Or she's a white player that's thriving in what's perceived as a black sport, and there's a idea in our community that she's getting more attention than what she deserves or whatever, and that element, the racial element, is in there definitely. The impact of girls basketball, I believe, is from all these girl dads that's out there. And you got a lot of guys now generally that's rooting, or they see their daughters in there, and that has nothing to do with race. That has something to do with the interest in female basketball is growing because we have daughters now that are playing basketball.
That Kobe was promoting before he was killed with his daughter, who was a standout at her
So
age.
here she comes. And so now when you have figures like this, I'm going back to Tiger. Tiger was going into a sport that we really don't play.
Right.
And some of the golfers resented that. But he rose the tide. Larry Bird at the time of the NBA, when him and Magic came about, those championship games that we see live now, those were tape delayed.
Yeah.
But because you had Larry Bird and you had a charismatic Magic, it changed the way we think of the game.
Caitlin and Angel Reese.
There you go. So that whole dynamic has always been here. I don't have no malice to her or whatever. I just appreciate the talent. She's a killer, man. She earned what she had. Basketball wise, she's a sharpshooter. I like her. As far as the basketball player, I don't get into the personality because I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if she could salvage the WNBA, but I don't like the conversation of where you're starting to say, well, why they don't get paid as much. I think that's the wrong sport to make that analogy because they don't bring in that much. That's a subsidized league.
That's rapidly changing. That's part of me bringing this up.
And when the revenue grows, so be it. The players tie your contract to that. You have a union. Unlike female tennis. See, tennis can make that argument. Serena could make, why ain't I making blah, blah, blah. I could see that argument. The same stands, the same TV contract. I get less pay. The males get more. Yeah. I definitely can see that because I believe that's one of the female sports that I believe is just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
Where we're familiar with their stars.
Yeah.
More so, I'm more in tune with the women's stars than I am the male stars.
I agree.
So that's how I see it.
Chuck, you got a take on this one?
I just like watching the women play.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark drew me into watching the tournament.
This is an example of what we're talking about.
Exactly right. And I mean, I didn't know a lot about the WNBA before this. I'm not a huge basketball guy, so, but I think she can be potentially really good for women's sports in general. And I remember going to a Gannon game years ago. I had a friend who had season tickets. He was taking me all the time to the games. We went to the guys' games. It was back when Aaron Garrity was playing, so this has been a while. And we would go early to watch the women play before. And I said to him after I watched a couple of women's games, they play better basketball than the guys do. They play really solid fundamental basketball.
They do.
And now the athleticism is ramped up amongst them. I mean, they can do things that are just absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
These are tremendous athletes, and I think I like watching them. That's
And
as
that
much as I
pattern
got.
started a while ago. I mean, the coach of the mighty South Carolina Gamecocks, Don Staley. Don, as a point guard, was every bit as talented as a lot of the standout male point guards in the WNBA. Don Staley was nothing to play with.
Cheryl Miller was evaluated as being better than her brother.
Exactly. And he said she was whooping him all the time on the basketball court. But the thing is, I made a comment on that show in my commentary. I used the Jamie Foxx example, and I won't rehash the whole thing. Bottom line, they asked, Jamie Foxx was asked in an interview who's the greatest of all time when it comes to comedians, and he said a lot of people would argue Richard. And my heart kind of goes that way too. But Eddie Murphy was the first comedian that made Hollywood pay up. So at the end of the day, there could be a GOAT in terms of who's doing the thing, but at some point, be it market conditions, a whole host of things, a figure comes along like he in your mind, he may not be better than so-and-so, but he or she is the person that's making people pay up. And I think about, even as we go to this in July, this Mike Tyson and is it Logan Paul or Jake Paul? Is it Jake Paul? Jake Paul. I get them confused. One thing I'll give those characters, they had a strong following on social media and have really pimped it to the tune of millions. And this is where I think Mike Tyson doesn't get enough credit. Mike Tyson has his own podcast. He's got his own cartoon. He's doing his thing. There's a businessman in there. And so they do it. Everybody, oh yeah, ha ha, and they see Mike training, and now he's starting to tell people, I got to unleash the God of war. He's coming back out. I can't put him back in now. He's the God of war. And so I'm thinking to myself, I said, I think Mike Tyson might be using this young buck because he's going to get all of his followers, right? Mike, like, I'm about to take advantage of all the attention this young boy is getting.
Yeah. That was a pretty good impression, by the way.
It was. He's done 2 of them. He got Trump down and he got Mike.
So I think we're not giving him enough credit, but there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely.
Bottom line is with Caitlin Clark, I've said, and I said then, hey, man, if this makes them open the checkbook more readily, stand in line for the check.
Yeah.
You know, what Lisa Leslie said when they were talking about whether or not she was going to make the Olympic team. Lisa Leslie was like, we cannot go to the Olympics without Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
That is not a good business decision, on top of the fact that she can just ball. We cannot go.
Yeah.
She's bringing attention just like you. Chuck wasn't interested, but Caitlin Clark drew me into the
Absolutely.
That's legit.
Yeah.
Like you said, Mark, I didn't
Tiger.
care about golf. We all golf now.
Yeah.
He changed the country club scene.
He
Yeah.
did.
In the most stuffiest area that you have.
And that goes back to something you said earlier. You were talking about it's a really good time to be alive in America.
Definitely.
And I think we forget that. We should do a show or two about all of the great things that are part of our lives as a result of being Americans.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Look at what we're doing now.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a podcast that could potentially be heard by billions.
We're 3 knuckleheads
We
sitting
could go
in a
viral.
room, and we're able to do this.
I could
which
become
is
a sex
awesome.
symbol.
Well, let's not be unreasonable.
Listen, we can do that. We can talk about all the things that are great right now. We don't have to make it great again. There are some great things still going on.
Right.
Right. There's some great things here in Erie. I think about right down the street, Blue Moon ice cream. I think about pepperoni balls.
Mighty Fine is back.
Oh my God. I think about those hot dogs without naming the company because we aren't getting sponsorship dollars with that skin on it that breaks when you bite into it.
Best in the world.
But you know, it's those little pleasures that are just indicative of Erie. And the big things. You're right, Mark. And we're on a podcast. We're expressing our opinion. You know, we're not going to get our doors stormed by the government after the fact. I don't know how far away we are from that, but as of right now, we can say it and go on about our business. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also say this because you're a big part of this, Marcus. Although we might have had our things about economic development, I'm gonna just tell a quick story. When I got to Erie, there were very few black businesses. And when I went and I got a Subway franchise on Parade Street, I was the only thing there as far as a black business. You had Manus A Plus, you had myself, and you had Crenshaw or whatever. But now I look at these young people today. I see the Triple D's out there. I see the McNairs, what they're doing with daycares. I see all kind of things. And I'm going to add our school. We have a school that I'm proud of, R.B. Wiley. We run that. We do that. It's a historically black school, to be honest with you. If you look at it, it is, because you got to look at what is the definition. What is a HBCU? All it means, because these are state schools. Jackson State is which I hail from. Jackson State is a public school, but it's still a HBCU. Okay, R.B. Wiley is a school that started with a lot of African Americans from the idea of R.B. Wiley. It came from a black organization's money, GDIC. $400,000 was given, and we running it now to a very successful, growing business and school that we're very proud of. Yeah. So there's a lot of positive things that we could say that's up and coming, and we talk about the East Side renovation that's being led over here by my man across the table. And now kids see this, and what would we say? If you could see it, you could be it.
That's right.
And again, when I first started, it wasn't a lot that I saw like that. And now it's nothing for these kids to say, hey, I'm going to start that business.
That's right.
And it ain't just restaurants or barbershops. It is vast. It is nursing daycares. It's all this. And it is an exciting time, but we still got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
So Mark has brought this show full circle. And as we close, because that is the perfect way of ending this, we started talking about the neighborhood development and everything else. And that's one of the reasons that we have to lay bare this conversation and push past the discomfort. There are multiple grassroots efforts that have generational changing implications. And we cannot put up roadblocks or redirect resources to mainstream organizations because it's the most comfortable thing to do. Right now, because you have so many people swinging for the fences in the name of the community, they should all have the opportunity to build these goals and dreams. You built R.B. Wiley, and here we are. How many years later?
It was 25 years
How
later.
about that?
Yes.
And so you figure and I could name them all, but I want all of these different grassroots efforts that are ethnic and started by ethnic folks and bubbling up. You want them to grow. You want 20 years from now for them not just be relevant, but larger, more embedded into the fabric of the Erie culture or what have you. And so we have to have the discussion right now.
Yeah.
We have to have the discussion. Money's there. We're in an investment state of mind in Erie. Give everybody an equal shot to build their dream, and don't play one group smaller than others. And so with that being said, this has been a great show. I want to thank both of you brothers for coming on. We'll be producing more shows going forward, but we wanted to slow down and recap and just talk about what's going on out here. And we want to thank you, the listener, as we come to a close. That's it for our show. You can tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests, and sometimes just me with my co-hosts here, Marc Blount and Chuck Cammarata. Remember, the next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and on the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. And also remember that new feature: if you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, you can call the next hotline, and that is at 814-240-8816. 814-240-8816. Leave a message. Tell us what you think, who you want to hear, what your thoughts are on what you heard. The list goes on. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.